Hello and welcome to another Moog demo library. In today's video we're going to be exploring Muse, and in particular we're going to focus on the macro controls on Muse's panel. Now there's 4 different macro controls. There's the macro knob, the mod wheel, and then there's the 2 amplitude knobs in the boxes of LFO 1 and LFO 2. And now when I say macro, what I mean is a single control that's able to modulate multiple panel parameters so that we can get some pretty radical morphing of our patches mid-performance. And in this particular example, what I'm going to do is use the macro knob to control both of the filters as well as the level of oscillator 2 in this patch. I'm going to start from an initialized patch, which is just a simple single oscillator sawtooth wave. The filters are wide open and there's a little bit of release on the envelope. So as you can hear, it's a pretty straightforward patch. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set filter 2's cutoff around 50%. And I'm going to go over to the assignable controller section and I'm going to hit the macro button. This is going to bring up our modulation quick assign screen. And what I want to do is set it up so that the macro knob controls filter 2's cutoff. So I'm going to move the cutoff knob and set a positive modulation depth around 50%. You'll notice that despite the fact that I swept the cutoff knob, the setting of the cutoff that happened before that assignment will be what we're actually hearing. So the knob has not changed settings. And if I move the knob, it's going to update it. But right now, we're where we set it around 50%. And let's hear how it sounds when we sweep the macro. So you can hear macro is now controlling the cutoff for filter 2. And even just using the macro to control a single parameter can be really powerful because let's say I have filter 2 at a setting that I don't want to mess with, so mid-performance I don't want to sweep the cutoff knob. I can still use the macro knob to sweep the cutoff and even set a particular range and depth for how much it sweeps. So it can be a really nice way to control how much change is happening without messing with a patch. So the next thing I want to do is also set the macro to control filter 1's cutoff. So I'm going to hit the macro button again, and this time I'm going to adjust the cutoff of filter 1 so that I have a positive modulation depth around 80%. Now let's hear how that sounds. And I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to set the resonance on both filters a little bit higher so that the sweep can be dramatic. So as you can hear, I get something like a bandpass response, but what's interesting is both filters are moving at a different amount from each other. So normally in a bandpass filter, they would sweep in parallel the same amount, but now they're sweeping in parallel at different amounts, and this gives us a slightly different response. I actually want to edit it slightly now so that the macro is sweeping filter 1 a little bit more than it currently does. So now I'm going to go to the mod map, I'm going to look at my second slot, which we can see is the macro controlling VCF1 cutoff. And I'm going to adjust it to something around 90. And what we can do is actually turn the macro knob all the way up so that it's at its maximum setting. And now that's going to let us hear any adjustments that we make to this value. So I'll hold a note down. And we can make an adjustment so it sounds just like we want. So I'm going to set it around there where the high pass filter is cutting out most of our signal. And let's hear how it sweeps again. So now the macro knob is controlling both filters. The last thing that I want to do is also make it control the level of oscillator 2. So I'm once again going to hit the macro button. And I'm going to set the oscillator 2 mixer slider all the way up to 100% and hit enter. And I'm also going to go to oscillator 2 and I'm going to set it so that it's a fifth above oscillator 1 so I get a nice interval when it comes in. And let's hear how that sounds when we sweep. So as you can hear, we can get something pretty dramatic where it's sweeping both filters as well as adding another interval in. But one thing that we can do is add additional functions to make it so that the sweep is behaving a little bit differently per slot. So I'm going to go to the third slot, which is for oscillator 2's mix, and I'm going to scroll over to the function box, and I'm going to set it to slew and make sure that the function is aimed at the source because I want to slew the macro control. So I'm going to set that slew value around 20. And I'm also going to go to the second slot and make this slew as well, but a little bit faster. So around 10 or 11. And now what's going to happen is when I sweep the macro up, even when I hit the top of its range, it might take a little bit longer to arrive at the settings that I've made in my mod map. So let's hear how that sounds. So you can hear when I move it really fast, there's a little bit of a delay to filter 1 and oscillator 2. This can just be a nice way to make it move a little bit more slowly so that all of the parameters arrive at their destination at differing times. Now, this is an example that's just using the macro knob, but we could also do the exact same thing with the mod wheel. And if we wanted to, we could even go into the modulation routings. So I'll go into each slot, I'll highlight the source, I'll click the select knob so it blinks, and then I'll go to the assignable controllers box and hit mod wheel. And I'm going to do that for all 3 of them. So now what I've done is just change it so that the same things are being controlled by the mod wheel instead of the macro knob. And now if I wanted to, I could take this example even further and control 16 different parameters on the panel with just one control. But I can also split duties between the macro knob and the mod wheel so that I can get some pretty radical morphs, but with 2 different ways of doing it, one on the macro and one on the mod wheel. And if we go to our LFO1 or LFO2 and we assign these to control multiple parameters on the panel, the other thing that we can do is control all of those modulation depths just from a single amplitude control. And if we wanted to, we could even make the mod wheel and the macro knob control each of these amplitude knobs separately so we can get really, really meta with how we're controlling all of our modulation within a patch. And it opens up a really deep and amazing sort of expressive nature to Muse, particularly when performing on stage.